The year is 1958. Chevy is looking over at what Ford and Dodge are doing, and Chevy notices that they need a big block to compete with Ford's MEL engine and Dodge's Hemi. Well, Dodge brought the Hemi out, then they took the Hemi away, then they were doing something with Cross Ram. They needed to compete with both of them, so Chevy builds their own big block known as the W Series. This family has three engine displacements, the 348, 409, and 427. This design was very experimental for a number of reasons. This design featured overhead valves, but not just overhead valves. The valves on this engine were offset with a unique rocker/valve cover that was scalloped. It almost looks like ram horns. The biggest thing that made the W Series engine stand out from the competition was the combustion chamber was located inside the block itself instead of the cylinder head, where it's generally found. Used dome pistons. When the piston approached top dead center, the angle of the crown combined with the head deck formed a wedge-shaped combustion chamber. With a pronounced quench area, spark plugs were inserted vertically into the quench area, which helped produce a steady, rapid flame. And the thought process behind this was, when making this engine, engineers were experimenting with compression ratios, and instead of having to retool the foundry every single time that they wanted to make a compression change, they experimented with combustion chamber in block. The combustion chambers in the W Series are located at the end of the cylinder, 32 degrees wedge-shaped combustion space. It's important to note that some heads have cutouts that one could mill into the head, which would allow the combustion chamber to be bigger, increasing compression. This engine is a side oiler, and all that really means is the oil gallery is located low on the driver's side of the crankcase. 2 bolt mains, heads are interchangeable, but with the high performance 409 and 427 heads, they have larger ports and valves than what was used on the standard 409 and 348 engines. All right, so some important information. 348, 409, 427, they all look identical. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry could put 409 on a 348 or 427 on a 348, but there is a way to tell the 348 from the other two. The 348, the dipstick is located on the driver's side, whereas the 409, 427 is located on the passenger side. But if somebody wants to rip you off, they could totally do that by changing out the oil pans, because the oil pans are completely interchangeable. While on the topic of 348, let's talk specs. 348 cubic inch displacement overhead valve V8, 5.7 liters. It's good for anywhere between 250 horsepower all the way up to 348 horsepower, 6,000 RPM, 364 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM. The 348 figure was in 1961 with 3 two-barrel carburetors, bore of 4.1 inches and a stroke of 3.3 inches. Compression is anywhere from 9.5 to 1 to 11.25 to 1. 5 main bearings. This engine weighs roughly 625 pounds estimated dry weight. The years that this engine was used was between 1958 and 1961 in cars and was used in trucks and through 1964. These engines were made for Chevy large cars. Think Biscayne, Bel Air, Impala, wagons, and light trucks. Chevy would bore and stroke the 348 to 409 cubic inch displacement overhead valve V8, 6.7 liters. It's good for anywhere between 360 horsepower with a single 4-barrel carburetor to 425 horsepower in 1963 at 6,000 RPM. 409 pound-feet of torque right out of the gate. In 1963, it produced 425 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM. With a bore of 4.3 inches and a stroke of 3.5 inches, compression 11 to 1, featured 5 main bearings, Moraine M400 aluminum bearings. The years that this engine was produced was 1961 to 1965, and that was the only window that the 409 was ever offered. The legendary engine that Beach Boys sang about was only offered for that window of time. 650 pounds is the estimated dry weight of this engine. So something I totally failed to mention, it was on purpose because I didn't want to give too much too soon. There's a lot going on in the background. The 348, 409 are considered Mark I engines, and this is where things get confusing. Tons of conflicting information. Chevy made two versions of the 427 between the years of 62 and 63. One was derived from the 409. Essentially, it was found in a 63 Impala for NASCAR known as the Z11 in Chevy circles. Experts say only 57 of those were made. 427 cubic inch displacement overhead valve, V8, 7 liters. It's good for 430 horsepower at 6,000 RPM, 575 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM with a bore of 4.3 inches and a stroke of 3.7 inches. Compression 13.5 to 1, 5 main bearings. The years that this engine was used was between 62 and 63. Side note, do not get this confused with the later 427 that was derived from the Mark IV block. Chevy also made another 427 experimental engine shrouded in mystery. Some even say this may be the missing link between the W Series and the Mark IV block. The Mark II Mystery 427 90-degree cylinder deck. Mystery motor was designed by Dick Kenneth. So before we conclude, it's important to know what's going on in the background. Chevy did a program, Mark 1 through 4. Mark 1 was the Series W engine. That was the 348, 409, 427. And then they were going to improve on it with the Mark II. The Mark II was the Mystery 427 motor developed. 409 went to 427. They did make a 396. The 427 was the only one that was raced. There was to be a Mark III. The Mark III was a big bore of the Mark II, but tooling costs were far too great to go down that road. Around this time period, there was also rumor that Chevy was going to buy Packard V8 tooling and production rights, but that was just a rumor. The predecessor to the W Series came in the Mark IV. Gone was the chamber in block combustion chambers that the W Series had. It turns out that that design caused the power curve to drastically nosedive above RPM range of 6,500. In its place was a more conventional wedge chamber in the cylinder head, which was now attached to a conventional 90-degree deck. The valves continued to use and displace an arrangement of the W Series engines, but they were also inclined, so they would open away from the combustion chamber and the cylinder walls. The design feature made possible by Chevy's stud-mounted rocker arms. As a part of the new head design, the spark plugs were relocated so they entered the combustion chamber at an angle relative to the cylinder center line rather than a straight line relationship of the W Series engine. This helped high RPM performance due to the new spark plug angle. The clearance provided by the distinctive Scout valve covers of the W Series engine was no longer needed. Wide rectangular covers were used instead. The W Series engine was completely phased out by 1965 in favor of the 396 6.5-liter V8 that was introduced in 1965 in the Corvette as an L78 option. This engine was good for 425 horsepower, the same as the most potent 409 ever made. Now it's time for Would You Rather 2 scenarios today. Would you rather have a 1962 Chevy Impala or a 1963 Chevy Impala or a 1964 Chevy Impala? I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Moving on to the second scenario, a little bit different. If you had the choice between these two engines, which engine would you choose and why? 409 with the dual quads, 4-barrel posi traction 409, just like the Beach Boys sang about, or a 396 that is similarly equipped. I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to get both the name of the band and the song title correctly in the comment section will have their comment pinned to the top of it. Thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below or check out our Facebook group that correlates with this YouTube channel. Engine episodes are going to be aired on Wednesday. We're going to make this a time slot going forward. So if you like Engine episode Wednesday, shoot it down in the comment section below. What engines would you like to see featured on Wednesday? Looking forward to hearing what you guys would like to see. And until next time, toodaloo!
Summer nights and streetcars take me back to the world gone away. Our new memories seem like yesterday.